Hey guys, what is up? SuperKmanrocks here, and I am here for my LPL Round 3 overview and analysis of both of the series that we got. Definitely some interesting ones that I was certainly very excited for, and I talked about that in my Round 2 recaps when I did my predictions for this round. Some really interesting games that I thought were going to be a lot closer than people expected, and we definitely got it. We definitely, we did not get let down in terms of the quality of the games. But how did you guys feel about it? Let me know down in the comment section below how you guys felt about these games before we jump into it. Who did you guys think were going to win? Did things go up to your expectations? Let's go ahead and jump into my review of it. I don't want to waste too much of your time, so we can get right into our first series here of Round 3. And it was probably the hype matchup of the playoffs so far, pretty much in any region, as we got the 4 and 5 seeds facing off against each other in the LPL. We had RNG, Royal Never Give Up, taking on Edward Gaming, EDG. A very interesting matchup here. I talked about this. Gala and Ming versus Viper and Mako. You're just not going to find a bot lane matchup that's going to be this hyped up pretty much anywhere else in the world. Obviously, Ruler and Prince on the same day is ludicrously crazy good. How good we're getting the ADC matchups on this day. But how did RNG and how did EDG fare in this series? Well, we're going to go game by game, starting here with game 1. And kicking off game 1, we had a big EDG win. Now, in previewing this series, one thing I want to note, I did talk about Junjia as the jungler for EDG because I assumed that he was going to be the one that was playing for EDG. He had played Alter at the end of the regular season and in their playoff series earlier this week against FPX, but JJ is actually coming back in and playing here for EDG. I'm a little torn about this idea. Obviously, I think at the peak, JJ is a better player, but quite frankly, over the course of the year, I think this team has looked significantly better with Junjia, at least heading into this series. So going back to JJ, I think is a little bit of a risk. The playstyle difference might catch up, or they might have figured out a playstyle that they want to repeat and replicate, and maybe JJ is just going to come in and fill that. So it's definitely going to be an interesting decision there, but they announced that a little bit before the game starts. So JJ comes in and EDG does pick up the win. This is a pretty dominant game from them. Not really a lot of pushback at all from RNG, which is kind of shocking considering they were I would say the favorites going into this. A lot of people knew this was going to be close. I definitely predicted it to be close. And it's no shocker how high I am on Viper. I've talked multiple times about how I think he is at worst a top 2 AD carry in the world, and in my opinion, the number 1 AD carry in the LPL. I'd take him over Gala, I would take him over Fodic, I would take him over Light, I would take him over Jackie Love. All of these other players, I would rather have Viper, and I think he really showed up in this game 1 on the Zeri. Now, Zeri is a pick that we talked about quite a bit, obviously, on this channel, but it can very much work, but it also can get countered. Sivir's actually a relatively good pick into it matchup-wise and in terms of results. If Sivir can get to that 500 CS, win condition, the 500 CS Sivir, or the 4-item Sivir, as we like to call it, that can really just take over games, she's going to be more impactful in those team fights than Zeri. So it's up to the Zeri to be a little bit more proactive in the laning phase, and I think Viper did exactly that. Him and Mako were phenomenal in this game as a duo. The Zeri Yuumi can be very difficult to stop, and honestly, when Gala's playing like this, it's not all that surprising that Viper's able to pretty much run away with the lane and then be able to run away with the game. Obviously, a lot of help from JJ in the jungle, which is very good. That's a very good sign. I was very worried, obviously. The playstyle differences between JJ and Junjia. JJ liked to focus mid lane, Junjia liked to focus bot lane, at least for a lot of the attention. And EDG has certainly found its most success just pumping resources into Viper. And it's good to see JJ kind of following up on that trend, going back to Viper, continuing to help him, gain these leads and put him in a position where he can win games. JJ, I thought, did a great job of that, but Viper and Mako really were the carries. Viper's the player of the game. Shout out Mako on the Yuumi, obviously not the flashiest of games on the Yuumi, but still, good Yuumi plays can happen. You can negate a lot of damage in laning phase, not necessarily from Sivir, but from Lulu. Typically, you can negate a lot of damage on the Yuumi if you play it right, so some interesting things there. You have Scout into a Galio in the mid lane as Azir. Honestly, not that bad of a matchup. I like the Galio pick generally, but I don't know into this comp if it's all that useful. Scout does fine. He doesn't really get this huge early lead, but he's able to translate it. And then Flandre's Ornn in the top lane. He just has to not die to Kennen. Overall, EDG, I thought, played it really well and put themselves in a really, really good spot to start this series. It really wasn't all that close. They were simply just the better team. As for RNG, definitely concerning. Obviously, I had been talking ad nauseum on this channel about my concerns with this RNG team. I have been very concerned throughout the regular season because even when they win, and I talked about this in my team preview section for them, they didn't look all that good when they won. They were a very concerning team in terms of, like, winning confidently, and obviously, it's not just the loss to, like, LGD. Even looking at one of their biggest wins of the year against JD Gaming in that 2-1 series, they were the worst team in that series, in my opinion, and they just kind of got lucky in the late game. I think a lot of their flaws are being a little bit highlighted here. They're pretty susceptible in draft, which is definitely concerning. Obviously, Wei, I think, is susceptible in draft. He goes on the Wukong here, and he's bad. Like, he just does not have a good game. He's my dud of the game here on the Wukong. Gets completely out-macroed by JJ. Like, he was nowhere on the map. But I think you could realistically give this to Gala or Ming as well, because they just got beat in lane, quite frankly. And really, if RNG is going to be able to hold up in this series, I detailed this in my matchup of the series, which was, of course, Gala and Viper. Gala has to step up. Like, he's got to be able to match Viper, not only in the early game, but in the late game, right? And in game one, it just wasn't happening. Ming goes to an Enchanter. That's something we've all known about Ming. It's a little bit concerning when he comes off of the Engagers. That's really been his playstyle his entire career. He goes on the Lulu, doesn't look all that proficient on it, and definitely concerning. Breathe in the top lane really didn't do anything. Xiaohu was never going to have a huge impact on the Galio if the rest of his team wasn't ahead. Overall, once Wei got super behind in the jungle, and once Viper got ahead in the bot lane, this game was essentially over. And that's why it ended so quickly, because there was really not a lot of tools in RNG's draft and in RNG's kits in order to help them come back. It would take a pretty miracle ult by Kennen, but even then, he really wasn't doing any damage in the back half of the team fight. Like, who's really going to follow up there? So, overall, just a really good win for EDG. They're going to be very happy to pick up the Game 1 win and to kind of get the momentum in their favor in this series. But then we get to move into Game 2 here. Now, can RNG bounce back, or is EDG going to take a pretty commanding 2-0 lead? EDG is going to pick up the win. That's huge for them. Going up 2-0 in a series in League of Legends is pretty much a death sentence for anybody going into them. It's really difficult to win 3 games in a row against some of the best teams in the world. And EDG have pretty much solidified their spot, you know, as a top-tier team with this win. At least like a competitive team. RNG certainly not out of it, but holy crap, did they look good. Not nearly as dominant, quote-unquote, as the first game, but honestly, that makes it more impressive. It looks like they really were able to learn from what they did in Game 1, come back here in Game 2, and even more refine it, get down to a science, and teamfight really well towards the back half of this game. The player of the game for me has to go to JJ. Again, when you're talking about the JJ versus Wei matchup, JJ just controlled the whole map. Everybody knows that I'm really not a fan of the Viego pick. I think even early, like, you're offering up a lot of options for the enemy jungler to be able to make plays around the map because there's just not a lot of matching that you can do pre-6. And JJ did that. He was very aggressive in the top lane, trying to help Flandre. He was very aggressive in the bot lane, trying to help Viper. Even Scout was trying to make plays around the map here on the Sylas, a pick that obviously he's very good at. They want to keep that pick away from Xiaohu, and it very much worked here in this game. JJ was awesome. He's easily player of the game. But you got to give Viper and Mako credit. Again, they go back to the Zeri. This time, instead of the Yuumi, it's the Lulu, and I think this combination is just as deadly. I know people talk about Zeri Yuumi as being unbeatable, but in my opinion, the Lulu is just as scary to go into. It gives you the same amount of protection while also offering a bit more of poke and a bit more of danger in lane, honestly, for the enemy bot lane. Gala and Ming try to answer by winning early. They pick the Lucian Nami. They want to try to get that lead. They want to try to snowball it. I imagine they want to try to bring Viego bot, bring Lissandra bot, make some plays, but Gala just loses. Like, there's really no other excuse for it. He just loses lane really hard, and Viper is, again, able to get the lead on that Zeri, and really, once Zeri gets a lead, she is going to snowball out of control. The problem with Zeri has never been her ability to play from ahead, it's her ability to play from behind, most specifically against champions like Sivir that can match her in damage output in a team fight. But when Gala just doesn't step up and doesn't perform in the series like he hasn't over the first 2 games, Viper has such an easy time of actively getting ahead and being able to take over the games. Mako, like I said, does a great job on Lulu. He was very close to my player of the game here as well. He was very good on the Lulu, keeping Viper alive, keeping Scout alive. JJ, really, he just did a great job of making sure that the poke in the lane kept the lane in a balanced wave state, because the Nami can be really annoying to lane into, and then when they wanted to make plays, he was super influential on the map in those. Big credit to Scout here as well, obviously stealing away the Sylas, not that Scout's bad at it, but making sure that Xiaohu doesn't get that. That's really been one of his signature picks, that and the Azir, obviously, all year long for him. And he goes into the Lissandra, which I think is an okay counterpick to Sylas. I think it's significantly weaker into the Sylas than it would be into something like the Ahri or the LeBlanc, but I still think it's playable. Xiaohu just played it very bad. Like, there's really no other way to put it. Xiaohu just got completely outplayed by Scout in terms of the macro game, in terms of support play here in the mid lane. Not all that good from Xiaohu, and Scout looked great on the Silas, being able to team up with JJ, move around the map. You have Flandre and the Renekton in the top lane. Kind of a boring matchup against Gwen. It can be exciting if you want to, denote jungle resources up there, but it didn't really seem like either team really wanted to go all in the top lane at the very least. So, honestly, great game overall, mostly from JJ, but being able to get Viper ahead, Mako playing really, really well in the mid game, Scout and Flandre exactly doing their jobs. Ad for RNG, again, this is not good. You do not want to be down 0-2 against a team like EDG because the chances that you beat them in 3 straight games is just not all that high. But it really wasn't all that bad of a game. Breathe and Wei really tried their best to keep this from being a problem. While Wei did get out jungled early, he did have a couple of really good team fights and was able to get some resets and get, relatively online, even if he wasn't in a position early to be able to make the same kind of impact that JJ was. And then Breathe honestly was fine in the top lane. He made some over-aggressive plays and died for it, but at the same time, like, you're going into Renekton, you get to that later part of the game, the Gwen is still going to be impactful. It was really everybody else on the team that was bad. Xiaohu, Gala, and Ming just did not perform in this game. Like I said, Xiaohu was really bad. He got completely outplayed by Scout. He's going to get the dud of the game for me. Gala and Ming on the Lucian Nami, that's a lane that you have to win. You are banking on winning that because if Zeri wins it, you just cannot contest her in the late game. And unfortunately for them, they could not win it. A lot of jungle attention, but at the same time, you got to be able to step up. And unfortunately, Gala and Ming just did not do that. This is part of my worry with Gala, right? Like, is when he goes up against some of the better AD carries in the world, it's not like he's looked entirely dominant. He has great positioning and a great mental, but at the same time, like, sometimes he just doesn't pull it off. Like, he looked good against Gumayushi at MSI, and outside of that, he goes up against someone like Viper here, and he just doesn't look all that great. I'm not saying Gala's not like a top 2 or 3 ADC in the LPL, but to me, I think, if anything, this confirms more that Viper is underrated in terms of the output that he puts in the LPL. He is a phenomenal player, not only in laning phase, but out of laning phase as well. Give Viper the credit he deserves. Unfortunately, Gala and Ming just aren't on the same level as Viper and Mako, at least so far through the first 2 games. So, is EDG going to be able to sweep the MSI champions, the reigning LPL champions in spring here, in their first playoff series? Well, going on to Game 3, they are not able to. RNG is luckily able to at least take a game in Game 3 here. That's got to be great for their mental, resetting a bit, kind of getting back on track. Obviously, losing Game 3 means the end of your playoffs, at least. You're pretty much locked for Regional Gauntlet, but, at least the playoffs aren't over for you. A lot of the good in RNG this game came from Breathe in the top lane. They said, screw it, we're going to go back to the playstyle we kind of played a little bit of in spring, where we denote a lot of attention to our top side. In spring, it was Bin, and Bin's definitely more of that quote-unquote, like, carry player, someone you can give a ton of resources to and is going to be able to completely take over the game. But honestly, I think we underrate how good Breathe is at that, or at least I do, because it really isn't his role on this team, or it hasn't been this role in Summer Split so far. Breathe has been a phenomenal player. I've been very high on Breathe for many, many years now. He just really doesn't get a lot of chances to shine here. They put him on the Fiora. They say, go play into the Vladimir and go win that side lane. Like, go become unstoppable. And he absolutely does that. He takes over the game on the Fiora in the side lane. You need at least 2 people to match him. That gives them numbers everywhere else. And it really just opens up whatever they want to do on the map. So Breathe is easily the player of the game here in Game 3 on that Fiora. Without him, they simply do not win this game. And so great on him. Really, really happy. You've got to feel good that your new pickup is at least kind of making your team look better, even if some of your veteran members aren't performing. But they did a lot better in this game, I will say. The bot side especially was a lot better in this game. Obviously, Gal and Ming had been getting a little toasted. They go back to the Lucian Nami versus Zeri Lulu matchup. A little bit more confidence in them. They feel better about it. They get a little bit of an early lead. It's not all that huge, but they are able to at least get Gala rolling a bit. And Ming is able to move around on the map. And I think Ming and Xiaohu have a really good duo connection together. It's a part of the reason why I felt so confident about this RNG team moving into playoffs. But they have a really good duo connection together. And I think we really saw that in this series. Ming had a great game on the Nami, was really able to take over, was really able to be everywhere. Whether that involved Gallo, whether that involved Wei, whether that involved Breathe or Xiaohu, Ming was kind of everywhere. He did a really good job on that. Xiaohu gets Talia, and even though his Talia is not all that perfect in this game, he certainly is better than Scout. Able to outplay, Scout, who wants to move around with the Trundle, wants to impact these lanes. Xiaohu just does that better. Even if Wei also wasn't perfect in this game, in my opinion, certainly some misposition mistakes. And sometimes where he just wasn't where he needed to be. I think overall the game was good for RNG, if not, it's certainly the best game they played this series, but it wasn't, not the most perfect game, but it was pretty damn good. As for EDG, you know, it's a game off. It happens. Game 3 after you're up 2-0, sometimes you just have those games where you try too hard to finish it in the early game and it just doesn't work out. Flandre got abused in the top lane. Breathe got super far ahead. He tried to go with the Vladimir into the Fiora, trying to be, you know, a little bit more of a team fight threat later in the game so that the Fiora felt like she had to answer something, but Flandre just wasn't able to be on nearly the same level. He was never going to be able to touch her in a side lane. That was going to be left up to Scout, unfortunately. And then Scout got super far behind because of the great roams from Xiaohu. And so, unfortunately, by the end of this game, it really was just over. No one on this team actually had a chance to touch Fiora. Viper and Mako weren't quite as good, but they weren't that bad. Again, like, playing into Lucian Nami can be a little bit of a problem, especially if you don't have the jungle attention that they got, like, in game 2. And so, definitely not the worst game in the world from Viper and Mako, but Scout and Flandre were definitely a little bit of a problem in this game. Like I said, Scout just got out-roamed and got to the point in the game where he was the one who had to match the Fiora, or really was the only one who could, and just couldn't do it. And then Flandre, by that same token, just was never even remotely on that same level on the Vladimir pick. A pick, obviously, he's very proficient on. It's something we've seen him on and seen him go back to. He loves these, like, crazy picks. We know he pulled out the Annie in spring, things like that. It just didn't work in this matchup, and, you had some room to go for it, so I don't blame him, but it certainly wasn't the correct choice, at least if they wanted the sweep. So overall, really, really good win for RNG. Not a terrible loss for EDG. Obviously, you can get past this, but moving into game 4, is RNG going to be able to translate this momentum, or is EDG going to be able to come back? And in game 4, the series is over. EDG with a dominant 27-minute win. Some risks certainly taken on the side of RNG, which I have to respect. You take the Vex here in the mid lane. Obviously, I'm not anti-Vex. I certainly think she can work in the meta, especially into something like Azir, where he's really going to want to get all the resources for himself. But you do have to win. And then you go for the Leona. Obviously, we know that Ming is better on these engagers. Leona is one of his best picks all time. But at the same time, it's not like Leona's all that prevalent in the meta right now. And it's not like Leona is honestly all that good in the meta right now. So you're really relying on your ability to play these champions better than your opponent. Viper and Mako this time do pick up the Lucian Nami. They want to go for the lane advantage, and boy howdy do they take advantage of it. They dominate the laning phase. This Lucian gets so ahead, being able to counter a lot of what Leona wants to do. Honestly, this Lucian Nami lane is really deadly into Leona because she can't go back out. Like, if she goes in, she's basically dead. You just have to hope that you trade kills. You have a lot of that here on the side of RNG too. Vex is in a similar boat. Viego is in a similar boat. If these two don't get rolling, it is pretty much impossible for them to win the game. And unfortunately, pretty much everybody on the side of EDG just outplayed them. Scout was way better than Xiaohu. It was a huge matchup disadvantage for RNG. Not only throughout the series, but especially here in Game 4. Xiaohu did not show up. Scout's going to get my player of the game here on the Azir. Some phenomenal plays, especially towards the back half of this game. I think you could realistically give player of the game here to Viper or Mako as well for how they played. Most especially Mako here on the Nami, who I actually think was pretty underrated for a majority of the series. But Scout also did play really well on the Azir. JJ again had complete map control in this jungle matchup. When he played the Vi, Wei had absolutely no answer to it at any point in this series. I'm not really sure if that says more about JJ's Vi or if that says more about Wei. But the Vi pick certainly worked. They were able to get Viper going. Scout got online. Flandre was Sejuani and he wasn't behind, so he was going to be a huge problem in the late game in terms of engages, CC, just tank things, you know what I mean? And overall, just a really good game from EDG. Not what you want to see from RNG. Unfortunately, this is how their playoff run ends. They only get to play in one series. They get to play 4 games in the playoffs. And, I think that's good and bad. I think there's certainly some things here. This is an upset, but also not an upset, and I'll get to that kind of when I do my series recap after I talk about what RNG did this game. They just got outplayed. There's really no other way to put it. They were the worst team between these two, and it wasn't really all that close, not only in this game, but in this series as a whole. Xiaohu just got destroyed in this mid lane matchup. Obviously, if you're going to go for the Vex, that's really all in pick, I should say, and so is Leona, and you really have to commit to these fights. Unfortunately, when you're behind and when you get behind in the early game, like both Xiaohu, Gala, and Ming did, even Wei got super far behind, like, when you go in, you just aren't able to do the damage that you need to actively succeed on this comp. So there was a lot of risk, I think, in picking what they did, and unfortunately, it just didn't work out for them. Xiaohu's going to get my dud of the game. Gala and Ming certainly didn't show up. Like I said, playing into Lucianami is never all that fun, but especially if you're playing Leona, because if her engages just don't go off, if you don't trade kills, if you don't get gold on the Zeri, like that matchup is completely doomed. And so not very good there from Ming, and then Wei, just not a good game on the Viego. Out of position all the time. Not a good series, really. Out of position, lack of vision, not really any map control, no objective control, like... It just wasn't a good series at all from Wei. Breathe versus Fondre tank matchup at the top lane. Neither really did anything. Breathe, ironically, was probably the only player on the team in this series to not really disappoint. Even in their losses, he was fine. Like, the Kennen game, I guess, wasn't all that good. But outside of that, he was fine. And he had a huge carry performance on the Fiora. But pretty much everybody else on this team that was, champions of MSI, just really underperformed against EDG and didn't really show up here today. So what does this mean? Well, for RNG... this really isn't all that surprising. I know I picked RNG to win this series, but honestly, this feels a little bit vindicating because I have been very low on RNG in terms of the grand scheme of things. I have always expected them to be able to turn it around, but I think this is definitely what they have shown throughout the year. This is the RNG that did show up in Summer Split, and I think we should have looked more carefully. I expected them to be able to turn it on for playoffs. This is a team that pretty much always can do that, but... just not this year, not in summer, really, at all, ever. Even last year, same thing happened against LNG, so... I don't know. Not a lot of really good performances in this series. Xiaohu, Wei, Gala, Ming, all got outplayed. Breathe had the one good game, but outside of that, it wasn't like he had a huge impact on the series, even if he was on tank duty, so... I don't know. I'm definitely worried about RNG when it comes to the regional qualifiers. It would be insane to think this team wouldn't be top 4, but honestly, like, there is still a chance that this team auto-qualifies as the number 2 team out of the LPL. If JDG does not make finals, like, JDG has to make finals. If they don't, RNG auto-qualifies as the number 2 team. It's actually possible. So, kind of crazy to say that, but definitely something to keep in mind that because RNG did go ahead and win Spring, they've actually not put themselves in that bad of a spot, but some things are going to have to go right, and if they do get to the point where the regional qualifiers come up, I'm not sure they really are, one of the best teams coming out of that. EDG might even be in that conversation. I just don't know if they could beat them. For EDG, this is relatively vindicating. I've been high on them, and I've been very high on Viper. This, to me, is as much of an inclination, as much proof as I could possibly get that my take on is right, that he is the best ADC in the LPL, because everybody would tell you that that's Gala, and I just don't think that that is true. Whether you want to believe it's Jackie Love at his best, I do think maybe Jackie Love at his best is better than Viper. We're going to get to see that matchup next week, so that's interesting. But, Orthotic, which obviously I heavily disagree with. I think Viper coming out and being, like, significantly better than Gala in this series just proves to me that I don't really know if there's anybody on his talent level in the LPL, maybe even in the world when he is on. He just dominates the game quite like nobody else when he gets resources, and love that for him. Scout was also great. Mako had a great series here. That's something I've been really concerned about. Obviously, Mako and Scout, not the most consistent of years, but they came back in. JJ looked really good, but he also did what Junjia was doing and went to Viper, tried to get Viper ahead. That's the strategy that EDG's been using to help out a lot. If that's what JJ is going to be doing, fine, keep him in. He might be the better player. Really, my biggest problem with JJ was that he wasn't investing in Viper, so if he's going to do that now, sure, keep him in. EDG overall looking really good. The matchup against Top Esports is going to be incredibly interesting, and I'm excited to detail that later in the episode, but for now, let's just celebrate this EDG win. You've got to be happy for the reigning world champs. That's going to do it for our first series here of round 3. Definitely, I think the one with a little bit more hype surrounding it, at least going into the week, but we jump into one that maybe had a little bit more hype from me. I was really excited to see these two teams clash. We saw a matchup between Victory 5 and LNG Esports here. Now, this is incredibly interesting because on paper, you would see this as a pretty heavily favored matchup in Victory 5's favor, but looking back on what has been happening over the course of the last few days, and honestly just the course of history, Victory 5 not performing all that well in playoffs last split, kind of moving in, LNG really underperforming in the regular season, but they're really getting everything together at the right time. A big problem that they had was it never felt like all of their players were playing well together. It was really light, and Lumao kind of stepping up, and everybody else just not being all that good. But when Ale's on, I think you can make a real argument he's better than Rich. When Tarzan's on, he's definitely better than whoever's in the jungle. When Doanbee's on, he's on that same level with Rookie. It was certainly an interesting series that I think people were not giving enough credit for. I said as much in my prediction video. And obviously, I went with Victory 5, but I was significantly less confident in that after I saw LNG's couple wins than I was before I saw LNG's couple wins, even predicting LNG to get here in the first place. So let's go ahead and jump into the series and see how that played out. Jumping in to game 1 here, we had an LNG win. They pull off a pretty big upset to start the series here. Obviously, Victory 5, super favored. They are playing Xiaolon Bao. That is what I expected here in the jungle. It won't last the whole series. We'll get to that, but a really, really good game 1 here from LNG. Light comes out firing. This is the guy who has been carrying LNG for a majority of the season when the rest of their players just simply have not been stepping up. I think Light has been criminally underappreciated by pretty much everybody in the LPL scene, and it's really good to see him come out here and kind of dog one of the LPL boys here that all the fanboys kind of go crazy over in Photic. It's really, really good to see Light show up. Him and Lumao played the Zeri Lulu lane very well. Like I say, I actually really do like the Sivir pick into Zeri, so long as you have complementary pieces that can try to make that work. I'm really not huge on the Xin Zhao coming out here in the jungle. I get it, it's Xiaolon Bao's best pick by a considerable margin, but I don't think it really synergizes all that well with Lissandra, and I certainly don't think it synergizes all that well with Sivir and Yuumi. I think there are picks that you could go for that do similar things to Xin Zhao, just maybe not on that same level. You yourself banned out a lot of them, unfortunately. So they go to the Xin Zhao. It's fine. He's really not all that bad. Really, the big problem here was that Light got ahead and top lane and jungle really dominated. Like, Ale was super duper impactful here on the Kennen with those flank ultimates. A really, really good game from him. He has been very good throughout the playoffs. He was also really good at the end of the regular season ever since coming back in for Pandacy. He's been really, really solid. He steps up here in game 1, and he quite frankly dominates Rich in the laning phase. We saw this matchup in the previous series, and it honestly went in Ornn's favor. This time it was not all that close. I can see this matchup relatively being boring. That's how I would at least predict it, but Ale was just better than Rich, which is something I was very much worried about going into this series, at least in lane, and he took advantage of that. He was able to get a lot of gold on the Kennen, and the teamfight potential of what LNG put together was actually terrifying. Nocturne could shut off the lights coming out of the mid lane here. You could get a Kennen ultimate in the dark, which would be terrifying to go into. You have a Wukong full engaging on you with a clone. You don't know which one it is in the dark. You have Zeri blasting on you in the back, Lulu keeping everyone alive. This is a terrifying team comp to actually have to 5v5 into. But that's kind of what Victory 5 wants to do. You have the Ornn, you have the Sivir. There are a lot of pieces on this comp that really do excel in these 5v5 team fights, but unfortunately LNG just executed better. Light's gonna get the player of the game, but big shout out to Ale, big shout out to Tarzan. They really played well here. Even Domenb and Lumao I thought were good, even if they weren't the central focuses of the game. But for Victory 5, not great, not great. They really didn't step up in this game. A lot of what I was really worried about kind of came to fruition, which is the fact that some of these lanes I really think LNG can just outskill. Top lane definitely being one of them, and that certainly happened with the Kennen being able to get ahead and being able to be a super impact in these late game team fights. Obviously, Kennen with gold is terrifying to go into, especially as like a Sivir in the backline. If Kennen gets on you, it really doesn't matter what happens at that point. Even through Yuumi shielding, you're gonna die. So you're not in a great spot, and Kennen was able to get ahead there. Rich did not have a good game. He did not do a very good job of maintaining that top lane pressure and did an even worse job of trying to be an Ornn in team fights where he just died significantly too early, was never able to frontline for pretty much anybody on this team. He's going to get the dud of the game here in the top lane. This is what I was worried about. Rich not being able to hold up in lane against someone who is really strong like Ale. But you got to give, like, it's not just Rich who played bad in this series. Xiaolon Bao, while he was able to make some plays early game, it just didn't matter. By the end of the game, he did target top lane a bit here. Obviously, Kennen being really a risky pick towards the back half, was able to get a little bit of pick-off gold, but at the same time, it didn't really matter. Xiaolon Bao didn't play all that well. Got completely out-macroed by Tarzan. Wukong was everywhere, and with this comp, it's just like, I don't know what Xin Zhao really does after 15 minutes, so unfortunately, he was pretty irrelevant. Ricky played the Lissandra pretty bad. I kind of like Lissandra generally into a lot of these picks. I like it into the Kennen, I like it into the Wukong, I like it into the Zeri. But honestly, all of them together, like, you only have a couple targets to pick from in this game. And unfortunately, Rookie just didn't have a lot of time and options to be able to do that. Not to mention that I think this Victory 5 team, because Photic wasn't ahead, was pretty behind on damage and really didn't have a lot of options here. Rookie being such a low damage mid laner did not help. And then, of course, you know, we talked about this in my preview for Victory 5. A lot of what they do rests on Photic being a hyper carry for them, being really strong. And when he loses lane to Light, that's not good. Like, obviously, a lot of help from Tarzan, some help from Doenby here with some really well-timed Nocturne ults, but like, Photic has to get online. Like, this team does not function without Photic winning, and so when he loses, this team looks bad, and that's very concerning. Light outplayed him in this game, and quite frankly, in my opinion, he's outplayed him all year long. Not saying Photic isn't the better player, but I think it's a lot closer than people think, and I think Light definitely has the chance to show up here and just be the better AD carry like he was here in Game 1. A lot of things to consider, but overall, good win for LNG, a great draft from LNG, really like the combo. Victory 5 definitely needs a bounce-back game here in Game 2. So, do they get it? Moving in here to Game 2, are they able to bounce back? They are. They are able to pick up the win, tying the series up at 1-1. Like I talked about in last series, if you go down 0-2, you're in a really bad spot in the grand scheme of things. Not a lot of teams can pull it back here, but 1-1, super manageable. Basically, you're just playing a best of 3 in the regular season again. Zhao and Bao played phenomenal here. He really was able to take over on the Xin Zhao. This is kind of the pick that can go right. They have, and I'm not joking here, the exact same draft on Victory 5 side, and very nearly the exact same draft on LNG side, except the Nocturne was banned out, so they go to the Yone. Fortunately, the Xin Zhao was able to get super far ahead this time. He kind of had a better idea of, I think, what he wanted to do, targeting Ale in the top lane, and late game being able to kind of shut down a lot of what the Yone wanted to do. I think it's a lot more helpful when you don't have that turn off the lights button to deal with here, because you kind of have a lot better of a target selection option, but still not in love with the Victory 5 draft. Zhao and Bao just played the game really well. He's easily player of the game. Without him, they have a much harder time winning this if he's not going off quite in the same way that he is here. But gotta give credit where credit's due. Rich played really well in the top lane on the Ornn. Obviously, got a lot of assistance here from Zhao and Bao. Ale was not allowed to play the game on the Kennen here in Game 2, really at all. But, you know, Rich still held his own. Same matchup. Like I said, it can be a boring matchup. I can see it going either way. With jungle attention, I can definitely see it going either way, and this time it went Ornn's way. Photic did a much better job at managing Light in this game. It's a very big sigh of relief, I think, from a lot of Victory 5 fans. If Photic just wasn't able to match Light in this series, I don't think V5 had much of a chance. That's why it was my key matchup. But Photic showing that he's definitely not out of the game just yet. He picks the same bot lane, goes into the same bot lane, and is still able to perform. So, very impressive performance here from Photic, from PP God. They are able to step up and match. Rookie again on the Lissandra. I like the pick significantly more into Yone. You have a lot of more point-and-click options here, and I think that that's overall just a good thing. The Nocturne, I think, really messed up what Lissandra wanted to do for a majority of that game. The Yone, not so much. So, very good win for Victory 5, and a very good bounce back. There's not a lot of analysis to do, because this game, honestly, was just kind of the other side of the coin to Game 1. A lot of the analysis points I made in Game 1 were, you know, they hold up here. I still think LNG's draft is really scary. If you can get off that perfect team fight, it's terrifying, but if you are behind, that teamfight potential goes significantly further down, and Zhao and Bao did a really good job to utilize his timings. You know, like I said, with Xin Zhao, there's really not a lot he can do into this comp after 15 minutes. Well, he did it all before 15 minutes. He got super fed, got a ton of gold, and if you have that much gold, you're going to be relevant in the late game. So, honestly, this was just an execution diff, I think, from Victory 5, and they played the game really well, evening it up at 1-1. So now we're basically jumping into a regular season best of 3. Both teams now kind of surging, have a really good shot to pull some stuff out here. Where does the series move to in Game 3? It moves to an LNG win. LNG is able to take it back here with a really commanding win. This was dominant. This was not all that close. We can talk about Game 1 being a stop. We can talk about Game 2 being a stop in both directions, but this one was like the least close of them all. Game 3 was an absolute demolition on the side of LNG. Pretty much everybody won. I really like the LNG draft here. Akali, I think, really unlocks a lot of what this team wants to do. Doenby gets a lot of options to take over the game. I'm usually not a huge fan of Akali on Doenby. I usually would rather him go to something like the Sylas or the Nocturne, but both of those being banned out by Victory 5, Akali goes there. But I like the idea, right? I like the idea of the roaming assassin in the mid lane that can take over the late game. I think Broadcast gave player of the game to Doenby, and I totally get why. He did so much damage in this game. It was kind of an impact everywhere. For me, though, I think the underrated MVP of this game has got to be Lumao at support. I think he gets a lot of hate. A lot of people were talking about him, especially in spring, as, oh, like, why are you playing Lumao? You have a Wandy on roster. A Wandy's so much better. Like, I think we've learned over the year that Lumao is just simply the better support, and I think he's proving that right now in the playoffs, as not only has he stepped up over the course of this playoff run, but in this game, he was really phenomenally outplayed. My second team All-Pro support, and PP God, obviously, PP God on the Yuumi. Same matchup that they've run all 3 games now, but this time Late and Lumao get the advantage again. whoever wins this, early game really tends to win the game, mostly because when Zeri gets out of control, she wins. When Sivir gets out of control, she wins. So if one of them gets gold, it's pretty much GG's. And Lumao did a great job of helping Light get that gold in this game. Not only that, but he was a huge centerpiece with Tarzan moving around the map, with Doenby helping him survive in these team fights. Honestly, just a great game from Lumao that I don't think he's going to get the respect he deserves for. Big shout out to Light, big shout out to Tarzan, big shout out to Ale. All of them won lane hard in this game, so honestly, LNG just was number one from the start. They didn't give up, I think they gave up one turret, like 2 kills. Like, this was not a close game even at all. There was really no hope for Victory 5 after a few minutes. A lot of that was due to Doenby taking over in the mid lane, Lumao doing a great job, and Light being able to capitalize on all of that. But moving over to Victory 5, this is very disappointing. They got hammered in this game, and it really wasn't all that close. Photic and PP God did not look good. Photic's going to get my dud of the game here. He didn't even participate in a kill in this game, which is not particularly insightful. Like I said, when Photic loses, V5 has a very hard time actively winning the game, because nobody else on this team is really that takeover player. Like, we can talk about Rookie and PP God both being this team's 2 best players, and I agree with that by a considerable margin, in my opinion. But neither of them are really that guy that wants all the resources. Obviously, PP God at support shouldn't be having that, but Rookie is not that kind of mid lane player. He wants to be the enabler. He wants to be the one that's moving around, giving resources to his jungler, to his bot laner. That's why I think Xiao and Bao has worked significantly better in this team, and I think it's mostly because Xiao and Bao, I think, is better accepting resources than someone like Karsa is. But when you have Photic not performing like this, it's really difficult to win games. When he's losing the laning phase to Light, when he's losing the laning phase to Lumao, even with jungle attention, like, it just becomes very difficult for V5 to do a lot. So Photic getting my dud of the game, kind of a problem. Xiao and Bao was just not good on the Bel'Veth here. This is a pick I'm just not a fan of. I've talked about this multiple times throughout the split. I think Bel'Veth has tricked a lot of people into thinking that she's really scary. She can do damage, but honestly, like, she really doesn't offer all that much in terms of team success rate. Like, what does she actually do? She's just damage in the jungle, and if she's not super far ahead, she's gonna get out utility by the Wukong, by the Akali, by the Zeri. Like, they're also all damage, but they just have significantly more options for how they can do that damage. And so, unless you're, like, giga-fed here on the Bel'Veth, it's just really difficult for me to imagine a world in which she can take over the game. So, really an unfortunate situation, I think, for Victory 5 to be in here. Down, 2-1 now is not great. LNG can close it out here in Game 4 if they win. Definitely a do-or-die scenario. Rich, I didn't even talk about. Rookie didn't play well. Like, it's really not worth going into them because they didn't play well. So, overall, Victory 5 has to have a pretty huge bounce back here because LNG simply has all the momentum in this series. They dominated Game 1. They dominated Game 3. They really feel like they have an identity figured out, and it's really going to take a bounce back from Victory 5 in order for me to feel a lot more confident about their chances. So can they do it here in Game 4? Can they pick up a win? Well, first, they actually have a little bit of a substitution. Karsa coming back in for Xiaolin Bao. He hasn't played for this Victory 5 team in quite a while, but he comes back in, and V5 is able to pick up the win. Kind of. You could maybe make the case that they were the better team in this game. It certainly is back and forth, but at the end of the day, a win's a win, and Victory 5 is able to keep the series alive and push it to a Game 5 here with a win, mostly off the back of Lucian Nami. Like, without Lucian Nami, this game is completely over. Rookie gets his Silas. I think that really helps out a lot, and those 3 really do all the heavy lifting for Victory 5 in this game. You could talk about Karsa coming in and then picking up a win, but Karsa did not look all that good. In fact, he looked pretty bad on the Nocturne in this game, kind of taking that pick away from Doenby, but also, like, I don't know. It's just not all that good in the jungle right now. The clear is way too slow. You don't really have all that impact on the gank pressure. Like, really, you just want to pair Nocturne up with somebody who's a little bit more aggressive, and that didn't happen in this game. Silas just isn't that pick, so Karsa didn't really pull it off too well, but, it's his first game back in. Maybe he'll step it up. Photic and PP God were really the central focus this year, and this is really what I keep saying with Victory 5. I'm going to go back to it again and again and again, because my point continuously still stands. If Photic is playing well, this team can win. But it's all up to whether Photic can win or lose. Like, this entire team comp is entirely focused around whether Photic can actively win the game for them. And in this game, he did. He played really well into Lucian. Those callings in the late game, people say that Lucian's damage falls off. I'm really not sure that that's true in any way, shape, or form. Those callings in the late game do a bajillion damage, especially with Nami buffs on him. Like, it is actually absurd how much damage this Lucian can do if he can get all his shit off. Like I always say, the problem with him is just his low range and his susceptibility to being punished for getting at that damage. But, when you have the Nami and when you have Rookie occupying so much attention, when you're able to turn off the lights like Nocturne is here, like, it honestly creates so much pressure here for Victory 5 that you create opportunities for Lucian to do that damage, and Photic definitely stepped up and did that here. Big shout out to PP God as well. Played the Nami really well in this game. That duo definitely requires both of you to be stepping up and playing it right, and I think both of them did in this game. Photic's going to get my player of the game, but PP got a very close second. Rookie also stepped up on the Sylas. Like I said, there's a difference between really good Sylas players and just okay Sylas players. Rookie is one of the really good Sylas players. When you can occupy an entire team and not really ever be in danger as Sylas, like, that's terrifying to deal with. And unfortunately, LNG had to deal with that this game. They didn't have a very good matchup with the Ryze in the mid lane. Obviously, they were going for something, but I don't think Ryze is all that good right now. Dolanby pulls that out, and then Rookie is just able to completely occupy pretty much everybody. Light's really never able to get through this front line and to be able to hit Photic and PP God in the back. But overall, good win for Victory 5, mostly due to the back of their bot lane, but shout out to Rookie. I thought he did his job well. Karsa and Rich were fine, but not really great pieces in this game, if I'm being all that honest. And then for LNG, they were in this game. Like, Light had gold on the Zeri. If he had more time, like, if he was able to get to the backline just a tad bit quicker, I think that there's a very good chance LNG is walking out of this with the series win here in Game 4. But unfortunately, they just didn't have that. Rookie did such a good job on the Sylas of buying so much time. Karsa being able to threaten at least something on Light throughout most of this game. Rich being able to threaten flanks on the Kennen was enough to give Photic the time he needed to destroy the team fights, and Light just didn't have that same opportunity with his team comp, and so he doesn't get to win the game. He played well. It wasn't really just Photic beating Light or anything like that. Both of the AD carries, I thought, played really well in this game, and it really was just going to come down to who was able to get their damage off in the team fights. Fortunately for Victory 5, that was Photic, but unfortunately for LNG, Light wasn't able to do it, even if him and Luma, I think, did play really well in this game. My dud of the game is going to go to Dolanby in the mid lane, and it's not entirely his fault. I don't even think he played all that bad, but the Ryze pick is just so useless. Like, it really just doesn't do anything, and so I don't really get it. You pair that up with a Xin Zhao that is such a low damage jungle mid duo if Tarzan doesn't have the gold to actively perform, and so you're putting so much on Light to actively win the game for you, and clearly that was the problem, right? Like, Victory 5 had so many more tools to actively move forward towards the late game here, even if they weren't in the best position. LNG just didn't have those tools, and so unfortunately, they fell here. Ale and Tarzan were fine. Like I said, Rich and Karsa were fine as well. Honestly, I think Ale and Tarzan were better in this matchup than Rich and Karsa, but the bottom three, in my opinion, went the way of Victory 5. So, that brings us to a Game 5. A Silver Scrapes Game 5. I think the first one in the LPL, this split. I think the only other one we've gotten was Damwon and KT, at least on this channel so far. So let's go ahead and talk about it. Who was able to take the series in 5 games? Was it Victory 5 or was it LNG? Did they get victory in 5? They did not. LNG is able to pull off the upset and take down the 3-seeded Victory 5 team in 5 games. A crazy Game 5 here. Overall, LNG played better, but it wasn't quite as clean as I think maybe the score lines would tell you. Overall, big shout out to Ale. When you put Fiora, when you pick a Fiora here and you go Lissandra, you go Wukong, like, you are investing in that Fiora pick. You're saying, well, hope we can get that Fiora ahead. And Ale destroyed Rich in lane, was able to get snowballing out of control on that Fiora, and the game was over. Huge game from Ale to really show up and show out for LNG here and to, you know, secure their spot in the top 4, which is absolutely huge for this team. I don't think a lot of people would even see that as possible throughout most of the season for LNG, but big congratulations to this team because they played great. Ollie's clearly the player of the game because this Fiora completely took over the map. It really wasn't even all that much of a debate. But you gotta give a big shout out to this bot lane because, man, did they show up in this series. We can talk about how Light and Photic was my key matchup. I agree with that, and I definitely think I stood by it. The games that Photic was able to outperform Light, Victory 5 won. The games where Light was able to outperform Photic, LNG won. And this was one of those games. Unfortunately, 3 out of 5 went Light's way, and that means that LNG was able to pick up the victory. Obviously, it isn't that simple, but, you know, just interesting that that's the way that things went. Overall, Light shows significant proficiency on the Zeri pick. It honestly wasn't even his scariest pick in the regular season. I'm surprised we didn't really see any Aphelios from either of these players. I know the patch, I think, went through, and Aphelios should be a lot weaker now, but even then, like, I would expect to still see him at least a little bit in this series, but the Zeri Yuumi was definitely something that Light and Luma felt extremely comfortable on, and they were able to perform on it over and over again. Once Light got ahead on the Zeri in the series, he was completely bonkers. He's actually going to get my player of the series here for LNG. I think you could realistically give this to Lumao as well, but a couple of games of Yuumi, it's not as easy to give player of the game to someone who played a couple games of Yuumi. Dombey played the Lissandra better than Rookie did the entire series here in Game 5, and it really showed, and Tarzan dominated this jungle matchup. As for Victory 5, it was really the top side getting beat again, and it's just unfortunate to say. I honestly think Ricky, Fodic, and PP God didn't play all that bad in this series. Even Fodic, who I think definitely had some games where it was like, oh, what are you doing? Most especially, I believe, that Game 3, where he was just completely outclassed. At least in the other ones, and especially in their wins, they were performing. Rookie, Fodic, PP God, they all kind of showed up today. Rich and Karsa did not. Honestly, Xiaolong Bao was really good. He was the reason they won Game 2. And they take him out for Karsa, and Karsa does not perform in either of the 2 games he gets to play in. That's going to be a killer for Victory 5, and you gotta wonder what if you just kept Xiaolong Bao in there. Definitely some things up for debate. Karsa's gonna get my dud of the game here in Game 5. My dud of the series, I don't usually do this for playoffs, but, you know, Rich I just think wasn't all that good in this series. The cracks in Victory 5 definitely started to show, as Rich in lane was abused by Ale, especially in the pivotal Game 5 here on the Fiora. He just was not able to go into him. Ale is significantly better as a player in lane, and that showed throughout the series, but most especially throughout this game. Overall, Victory 5's gotta feel heartbroken. They are also out in one series, just like RNG. I think a lot of people are gonna be surprised by that, but even though I predicted it, I, again, feel relatively vindicated by this result, because I just don't think there were a lot of people that were as confident in LNG Esports as I was. I was confident this was not going to be an easy series for Victory 5, and even going back, and I listened to my thoughts on my preview on the previous video before recording this, and, you know, when I was talking about it, I was talking about how Ale was probably better than Rich. I was talking about how Dombey Rookie would be interesting. I was talking about how Tarzan was probably going to out-jungle, and I'm thinking to myself, like, why didn't I just commit? Like, I was talking like I thought LNG was the better team, and then just said Victory 5 was better. I should have committed. LNG was awesome, and they're proving that they're kind of living up to a lot of the preseason hype that people had for this team. Tarzan and Dombey are online, whether you like it or not. Light is playing some of the best League of his career. Ale dominated Rich in this series and looks really, really solid. This could be an actual title contender LNG team, and I think that's awesome as the 7th seed. All I can really ask for is I hope that they are able to keep it up. They have a very, very tough matchup against JD Gaming coming up. We're going to preview it later in this video, but what an awesome win for LNG. They've already exceeded so many expectations, and you've got to be happy for them making it into top 4. Alright, that's going to do it for my review of both series that happened in Round 3 of the LPL playoffs. It is time for my Round 4 predictions, analysis, going over the series, all of that fun stuff. We're going to be going over the top side of the bracket first, which means that we're getting to our number 1 seed matchup here. We're getting Top Esports versus Edward Gaming. Top versus EDG is an incredibly interesting matchup. I actually think this is one of the more interesting matchups possible in the playoffs. Really, these two teams match up against each other in a very interesting way. I think if you go lane by lane and talk about where things, you know, where you would expect advantages to be, you probably end up somewhere around 2-2, where, you know, 2 to 2.5 to 2.5 even, really, where it's like Flandre and Mako should probably be the better in top and support over Mark and Wayward. But I would take Tian and Knight pretty heavily over Junjia. I have Junjia listed here, but it could be JJ. I just don't know. It could be either. I think both fill similar roles, but I would take Tian over Junjia and JJ, and I would take Knight over Scout. So you get to that point where you're like, okay, well, what do these teams want to play through? Well, we've talked about Top Esports. Knight is the guy here for Top Esports. Tian won the MVP, but Knight is the focal point for this team. Wherever Knight is, that's where the resources are going. Whether he's on the Ahri, whether he's on the Silas, hell, when he's on the Talia. Wherever he is, the rest of the team will follow, most notably Tian. They are going to be making plays around that. If that is just making 2v2 plays in the mid lane, that is very possible to just get Knight ahead. When he gets ahead on Ahri, he is an incredibly scary player. Even on the Silas, it is a very, very difficult proposition to beat Knight from ahead. And Tian will definitely help him get ahead. But if they want to make plays top lane, they've done that multiple times per split. You can see a pick like Gwen come out. You can even see a pick like Gangplank come out for Wayward, and they can try to attack that top lane, try to get some gold on Wayward, try to move that situation along, and then obviously they can also 4-man bot lane here. Tian and Knight can move down there and make some plays, but my point is, wherever Knight is, Tian will probably also be, and that's where the action is going to be for Top Esports. That is how they like to play. What does that mean for Edward Gaming? Well, It's kind of the opposite of what EDG has moved out of over the course of the year. They kind of did a very similar thing with JJ in for a majority of the year, where they did kind of play through Scout in the mid lane. Wherever Scout was, that's where the resources would go. Whether it would be a 2v2, whether it would be a 3v3 in the top, 4v4 in the bottom lane. Wherever Scout would go, that's where they would get the resources, but they weren't finding all that much success on it because they were picking things like the Azir. They were picking things like the Corki. They put Junji in, they realized that Viper is the guy on this team, and they started investing super heavily into the bottom lane. Now, this could be a really good thing for EDG because, as we all know, Top Esports has a very good bot lane, but they're not the most consistent bot lane in the world, and they're certainly one that can get caught being over-aggressive. So, if there are situations where that jungle's gonna go bot lane, if TES is in a bad position, I can see an opportunity for EDG to get ahead here, but also, that could open up a lot of opportunities for someone like Knight or even someone like Wayward to get some advantages on the other side of the map if they have the numbers advantage. A very intriguing series here. And like I said, it's a 2.5 to 2.5 series, in my opinion. You've got the top and support in favor of EDG. You've got the jungle and mid in favor of Top Esports. What does that leave left? That leaves my key matchup of the series, which is, of course, going to be in the bottom lane here. I don't know how I could possibly go in any other direction for this. JackeyLove versus Viper is going to decide this series. If Viper can outplay JackeyLove, like if JackeyLove doesn't show up, if it's not the perfect JackeyLove, EDG's in a great position. If Viper gets ahead, I have a hard time seeing EDG losing to basically anybody in the world if he can get ahead enough. But that is a proposition against JackeyLove. It's not like he's some awful, awful player. Yes, I think he's a little overrated in terms of how he's played this year, but the stats don't lie. He's first in damage percentage, first in damage per gold, first in damage per minute. He certainly has his moments where he can int, but when JackeyLove's at his best, you could argue that he's the only AD carry in the region better than Viper. This is going to be an absolutely stellar matchup. If JackeyLove comes ready to play and shows up and can outplay Viper, can really get himself a lead, can stop Viper from really getting snowballed out of control, TES is going to have a lot of fun. Knight's going to be able to move around on the map. Tion's going to be able to get every objective, and TES is going to have a huge, huge advantage from that. But on the flip side, if EDG can get Viper rolling, I actually find it very difficult to imagine a world in which anybody on TES has the ability to stop that, because the guy on TES who should be able to stop that is JackeyLove. And if JackeyLove's behind, if Viper's winning this matchup, he's first in KP percentage, he's first in KDA, hell, he's even second in damage per gold percentage, he's third in damage per minute. It's not like he's all that much lower at his best than JackeyLove is. If Viper can get the ball rolling, if they invest more into Viper, and if the resources go down there, I could very well see a world in which EDG is just simply the better team here. So I think it's going to be super fun. I'm not going to be bold enough to pick EDG here, but overall, I still think it's going to be a blast, and I can certainly see a world in which EDG just comes out of this matchup as the better team. But this is all not accounting for Tion and Knight, and I really think they're going to be making the difference here. Even if Viper steps up, hopefully you're going to have some step-up performances from Tion and Knight, and you should hopefully get a good version of JackeyLove. If all that happens, I don't really see a world in which EDG can super compete, but all of those things do have to happen. You do have to have everyone playing well in TES, and that really does open the door for EDG. This is going to be a lot closer than I think a lot of people give it credit for, and I'm really, really excited to see how it pans out. Moving on now to the lower half of the bracket, and we get our number 2 seed jumping into a series here. We talked about the number 1 seed, but we get the number 2 seed now jumping in. It's JD Gaming taking on LNG Esports. A really intriguing matchup, I think, between these two teams, because I actually think a lot of what they do is very similar. I do think there are some key differences. I think LNG does invest a little bit more into their bottom lane than a team like JD Gaming does, but really, this is a team, these are both teams that want to focus around their mid-jungle duo, and they have been doing that all year long. Maybe not for LNG, but that's what they've been doing in the playoffs at the very least. Tarzan and Doenby versus Kanavi and Yagao is going to be one of the more special mid-jungle duo matchups that we get to see all year long in any region, and I'm very excited that we get 5 games of that. I really think it's going to be interesting to see how that matchup goes, but there are a lot of more interesting matchups outside of that. Let's talk about the top lane. 369 might very well have been the best top laner in the region this year, and I honestly don't even think it's all that close. For me, he was very clearly number 1. He was clearly taking advantage of pretty much everybody, even other good players, able to generate leads more than anybody on tanks, on carries, on the Gangplank, on the Gnar, on the Sejuani, on whatever, right? Like, 369 was able to do it a career year, a career bounce back year especially for 369 here, but Ollie's been the best top laner in playoffs, and I don't think that's all that controversial. He's actively been able to dominate, and that's what he did in the series against Victory 5, he was able to take advantage of Rich. Now, Rich is not 369. Those are two very, very different players, but Ollie versus 369 is going to be an incredibly intriguing matchup to watch, and so will this bot lane matchup. Now, on the surface, I think I would generally actually give this to Light and Lumao. Definitely considering with how they played. Light was kind of the guy for LNG, and he's really stepped up over the course of the year, but I think Hope and Missing get a really, really bad rep. Missing's a phenomenal support, and I would say Missing has a pretty huge advantage in terms of talent, in my opinion, over someone like Lumao. Now, that's not to say Lumao's a bad player, but Missing is a very, very good player. So I think it's going to be an interesting matchup. If Missing is able to be better than Lumao, if Light's able to be better than Hope, what do we end up getting? That's going to be a very, very fun thing to watch. Hope, obviously, you know, not the most experienced player, really came in spring to just kind of pick things up for this JD Gaming team. Is that going to impact? You're in the top 4 now. You really got to make every single game you play count. And, you know, one small slip-up from somebody who's just maybe not as experienced on this kind of stage could definitely be influential. You definitely have the mid lane matchup here as Yagao and Doenby. Whew, like, very, very intriguing. Doenby has been better than Yagao. He's kind of been Yagao, but better for so many years now that it's crazy for me to say, but Yagao was just better this year, and it wasn't all that close. Yagao, in my opinion, was very seriously in the MVP conversation. He was an all-pro caliber mid laner in a region where the top 4 mids arguably were the 4 best players in the region. Yagao was phenomenal for JD Gaming. You can make a real case that he was the best player on the team. I don't think I would agree with that, but I think you could make a real case for that, and a lot of that's just because he picked up the meta so well. The Ahri, the Taliyah, those picks coming out from Yagao, he played with masterful expertise, especially that Ahri. It's a pick I expect to see either banned or stolen a lot in the series because I don't expect Yagao to be able to get it, but if Yagao can perform like he did in the regular season, if he can outperform Doenby, we're looking at a very, very interesting series here, but really, I think we all knew what the key matchup was going to be, so we'll move on to that now. My key matchup for the series is in the jungle. It's Kanavi versus Tarzan. Now, I really think that the winner of this matchup is going to really dictate how the series goes. And just looking at the stats, the regular season, Kanavi has him beat in everything, and he blows him away in most of them. 4th in KP percentage, 2nd in damage percentage, 1st in damage per minute as a jungler, even just 3rd in KDA, like at worst 4th in damage per gold percentage. Like, Kanavi was dominant, and he was probably this team's best player for a reason. And Tarzan on paper doesn't look like he stacks up. That's because Tarzan didn't have all that good of a regular season. In the regular season, I would have told you that this matchup was highly favoring Kanavi, but this is Tarzan, and we're really getting a glimpse of the real Tarzan in playoffs so far. He's been playing 3 series, and honestly, it very much has felt like the real Tarzan has come back out. If we get the best version of Tarzan versus the best version of Kanavi, which I really do think is a realistic possibility, this is going to be an incredibly important matchup. Kanavi being the best jungler, in my opinion, in the region in the regular season split. Tarzan, at his best, probably the most talented jungler this region has. The clash between these two, I think, is very much going to determine a lot, especially when it comes to map control. That's something that both of these two do at an expert level, especially Kanavi, when they are winning, is make sure that the enemy jungler doesn't have options. They get the objectives. They're able to get to the lanes first. That's what these two junglers do really well. And if they can subtract the other from the other team, that is a huge blow to whichever team. LNG losing Tarzan and not having him as that huge impact in the game really costs them a lot of their macro decisions and leaves it heavily up to that bot lane to be able to carry. But the same thing for JD Gaming. You're leaving a lot on Yagao to be able to take over on some sort of assassin at that point, or someone like 369 to be able to team fight really well. There are so many things that can happen if this jungle matchup sways in one way or the other that, for me, it is so clearly my key matchup of the series and one of the key matchups of the playoffs. I'm very excited to see these two teams go against each other. I am going to favor JDG slightly because I do think that I trust Kanavi and Yagao slightly more than I trust Tarzan Doenby right now. But honestly, if you would have asked me 3 weeks ago, it would have been a no-brainer. Right now, I think there is actually a chance that LNG is able to take out this powerhouse of a JDG team. I'm very excited to watch this series, and I'm very excited to see if LNG can step up to the plate once again. All right, that is going to do it for my Round 3 LPL playoff overview of both of the series that happened. This bracket is certainly shaping out to be one of the most interesting ones that we could have gotten in the LPL. Like I said, My predictions have not changed. I'm still going to go with Top Esports and JD Gaming, but I certainly am not locking in either of those. I think EDG and LNG both have a real shot to move on. Obviously, losers are not out of the tournament. Losers bracket has officially started here with top 4, so even if you lose in this series, that is not the end of your LPL championship dreams. It just means you lose your first life. So it's going to be interesting to see how these teams shape up in these first series. Obviously, I would expect a lot of risky plays, a lot of fun things to happen, but let me know how you guys feel down in the comments section below. What do you guys think is going to be happening in these two series? Who are you picking to win and why? Let me know down that. Let me know that down in the comment section below. And of course, I'll always say this, leave a like if you guys do enjoy. Hit the subscribe button if you want to see more of this content. I'm going to be posting it all playoffs long for all 4 major regions. If you're enjoying these videos, I highly recommend you hit the subscribe button to make sure you get all of these in your feed. But with all that being said, I hope you all are having a great day. I hope you continue to have a great day. And I will see you all later.